the time to be with us. If everyone could please join me in giving Dr. Rogerson a warm Mustangs welcome.
Thank you for that. I feel I should leave now while I'm ahead. Thank you for that warm text and welcome. That was fabulous. I'd like to share with you that just in my few short hours here on campus, I see an incredibly impressive university, and one that I already feel I want to be part of. So I think that's important to tell you that. But that doesn't really address what I was asked to comment on, which is namely, why do I want to be your next president here at MSU? Well, quite simply, as you've just heard, I've worked in 8 universities, in 4 American states, and 3 countries around the world. And I know I have developed the skill sets and leadership capabilities to guide this university through the next decade. And make no mistake, the next 10 years will be nothing like the 10 years we've just lived through. The educational landscape is changing at breakneck speed, and we need to be aware of all that is happening in this landscape. Let me start with a mile-high look at education in America, and then zero down into specifically why I would love to be here at MSU. Historically, this success has been based on access to education and all the opportunities afforded to a large percentage of education. And we can see this as the fact that each generation over the last 50 years has surpassed the educational level of their parents. But that's now changed. Today's adult population, as reflected by everyone in this room, is the brightest in history. But you will not be matched by the up-and-coming generation. And this is because educational opportunities are slipping. We were number 1 in the world in terms of the percentage of adults with a higher education. We're now number 12 in terms of developed nations. Way back in 2006, the Spellings Commission produced a report on the future of higher education, and that sort of gave us our first wake-up call. Fewer US adult degrees. The costs were rising faster than inflation. And the employers were reporting that many of the graduates were underprepared for the workforce. Many couldn't write well enough to satisfy employers or reason clearly, even though all universities rank critical thinking as number 1 in terms of their primary goal for higher education. So what followed was articles and studies which prompted Jeff Selingo, who is the editor of the Chronicles of Higher Education, just last year to comment, American higher education is broken. He wrote an entire book on the subject, and here are just a few highlights to support his contention. The 6-year graduation rate across America is just 57%. In short, almost half the students who started an institution don't graduate. Federal Pell Grants are shrinking. In the 70s, they used to cover 75% of all the costs a student incurred doing a degree. Now they cover just 32%. And those same Pell recipients are also the major borrowers in this country for their education. We all know that state support is dwindling and students are having to pay more. Last year, tuition across the nation increased by 8.3%. That's the biggest jump on record. And of course, as these costs spiral out of control, student debt has now soared to over $1 trillion in this country. There's many risk factors affecting why a student doesn't complete a degree, but the biggest one is low income. It does come down to money. It's a somewhat upsetting statistic, but if a family income is $80,000 or more, their student has an 80% chance of graduating by the age of 25. At the other extreme, if a family is earning less than $30,000, the chance of completing that degree drops to 11%. And 25% of graduates now are called boomerang kids. In other words, after graduating, they can't find a job, so they go home to their parents. My daughter is a graduate from Santa Cruz and is one of those boomerang kids. I could go on, but I hope you get the picture. And my point is that we need to be incredibly aware of these changes, and we need to be prepared to adapt in the coming years if we are to thrive. I think it's an exaggeration, but I could show you projections, published projections, that suggest half the universities in America will close over the next 20 years. This is why I want to be your president. I love challenges. I solve problems. And I can make MSU change appropriately, albeit slowly, since we all know that universities are not inherently agile. And why MSU? Well, quite simply, that's because of the liberal arts focus of this university and the COPLAC tradition. Because I'm 100% behind the liberal arts and sciences educational model. Liberal education has been around for 100 years or more. It's been the hallmark of the US educational model. Almost 1/5 of all US presidents graduated with a liberal arts degree. But liberal education right now has come of age. It's what we need for the future. It's what employers are asking for. They want graduates who can think, innovate, solve real-world problems, and adapt to new challenges. The most compelling case I have heard of late of why we should be giving our students a liberal education is that we have absolutely no idea what the job market will look like in 5 years' time. I cannot stand up here in front of you as your president and advise you to tell your children to go and do a degree in this subject, because that's where the jobs will be. We don't know what the jobs will be, and we just know that there'll be more challenges for graduates because there's so much automation in the world now, and the chances of some of the entry-level jobs going away are very high. Let me quote from the Association of American Colleges and Universities. The key of educational excellence lies not in the memorization of vast amounts of information, but rather in fostering habits of mind that enable students to continue their learning, engage new questions, and reach informed decisions. This is the promise of a liberal education we so value here at MSU, and why I want to be here, and why we must ensure all our students master the arts of inquiry and innovation. So how wonderful it is that this first forum is with the staff. You are the cogs that make this university function. No, let me rephrase that. It's rather insulting to call you cogs. You are the engine of this institution. You're the people who negotiate the day-to-day details, the folks who are often backstage, but nonetheless indispensable in terms of providing unique strength and service to the university. Future change and achievement will be largely based on your willingness to adapt and your contributions and commitments as we together negotiate the future demands of higher education. If I'm successful in this search, I would ask that you work with me, and in return I shall create a culture of gratitude, appreciation, and acknowledgement of your work. So thank you sincerely for all your time here today. It means a lot to me. I'd like to open up for questions. Any questions? Don't be shy.
I'll go first.
Hello, I'm Pam Morgan, and I'm director of the center that oversees the online learning and the continuing ed and professional development and the English Language Institute. And I noticed that Sonoma has a lot of certificate programs, and that seems to be very popular both for credit and non-credit. And I was hoping you could talk about what drove that demand to create those programs, kind of how they're set up, and then how did you create buy-in with both faculty and students or consumers?
Thank you for that question. It's a good one. I spend a lot of my time over 4 years talking to employers because, let's face it, you want to go to university, you want to come out, you want to find a job, and you want to make a life. And when I talk to employers, they love the liberal arts education, they want that, but they want something extra coming from the students in their degree package. it's very similar to what Thomas Friedman, I don't know if people read Thomas Friedman, popular articles in education, but his latest book is entitled The Way We Were, which sums it all up. And basically in that, he's saying you must come out with a degree, but you must have something more, something that really catches the attention of your future employer. And so along those lines, and we do that already here by giving our students creative experiences, and there's a huge push at MSU to give more research to our undergraduates. But in addition to that, I felt we could give something extra in the form of a skill-based certificate. And so 4 years ago, because I'm in a university that's very rich in faculty governance, and I love that, but it means you don't do things overnight. And so for 4 years, I've been moving into place this certificate program idea through extended education, so that it's available not only to the community members, because retraining is very big in communities nowadays, but also for our students to add it on to their degree as something extra. And so as I look around my university and I see the largest program is psychology, that's our largest undergraduate major, I know that 95% of those students will not become psychologists. They will be looking for a job in the workplace with the broad education we've given them. And now they can do something extra to really catch the attention of the employer. So the kind of courses that we're running as these extras, one being very successful conflict resolution. It's a very good skill to have if you're getting into business. Another one is social media for the workplace. That one's standing room only. Imagine being a psychology graduate looking for a job in HR and having a course certificate that gives you credibility in social media for the workplace. Data handling's another one. The list goes on. Hospitality is a big one where I come from. We've got a lot of wineries, so hospitality management helps students get jobs in tasting rooms. But that's the kind of skill-based certificate that I've got faculty behind, and everyone's willing to do it. And it's been because of, I believe, my somewhat very open management style. I always collaborate, in this case with the Faculty Senate and with the faculty on the campus. I'm always available. I listen to all points of view. I work slowly to make change happen. I get people behind me and we make things happen. And that's one of the things I can do at MSU. I can be a change agent, albeit slowly, because we're in academia. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome to Wichita Falls and MSU, Dr. Rogerson. I'm Dan Williams, Chief of Police here on campus. I'd just like for you to speak for a few minutes of your ideas and thoughts of the role of law enforcement on a college campus, and of course, the big topic in Texas as well as with many other nations, or in many other states right now, is guns on campus. And speak to that, please.
Well, I think particularly in this campus where we're becoming very residential and we're moving towards being a almost 100% residential campus, then law enforcement's main job is to make this a very safe and welcoming campus environment for all our students. We cannot have students coming onto this kind of residential campus without feeling it's a safe place to be. It's also an incredibly important piece of recruitment. I make no apologies for Sonoma State having way more students wanting to come to that university rather than in terms of the ones we can actually accommodate. We have about 14,500 students apply to Sonoma State each year, and most of them choose us because it's the safest campus, I would say, in the 23 campus system of the California State University system. We're 100% residential, and we are very safe because we have an excellent police force, and I commend you for that. 70% of our campus are women, and again, that also is reflecting the parents feeling that we have a very safe campus because of police services. I have heard a little bit about the gun controversy. I can't imagine guns on a campus. It just doesn't seem like a good idea to me, for many reasons. But of course, I think that whole discussion has to be made with everyone on this campus. That is not a decision that the campus president could come out and just suddenly make a ruling on. I would hope that we could have a lot of discussion with that, particularly with police services, get arguments as to, solid arguments as to why we would really want to try and not go along with this blanket order to let everyone carry a gun on this campus, but maybe be allowed to make some rules that apply to university campuses so that we could be very sensible about this. It just seems to be a recipe for potential disaster if we have students who will every now and then get into little confrontations with each other that suddenly could escalate to serious violence if guns were readily available. We're talking to a former Scot here, where the concept of carrying a gun is somewhat foreign to begin with, but I do understand, this is America. I don't know enough about the actual issue to comment further. That's enough. Thank you. Everyone's been way too polite and nice. This is your big chance.
Welcome. Michael Mills, Director of Housing and Dining Services. Will be transitioning into the Office of Study Abroad this summer. So as someone who's spent pretty much all of his career working in student affairs and will be transitioning to the academic side of the house, could you elaborate a little bit on your thoughts about the bridge between student affairs and academic affairs?
I'd love to. It's absolutely huge. So I actually do know quite a lot about student affairs because for 1 year as provost, head of academic affairs, I also had student affairs under me. There was a merger that we did for 1 year, which was very successful and would have been sustained if it hadn't got too difficult to deal with. But it really brought home to the importance of how important student affairs is. The co-curricular experience on a campus is enormous. By co-curricular, we mean learning outside the classroom. We really have to pay attention to that. We want our students to be on this campus and be engaged with the campus, and that happens all through student life and all the different components of it. We are a 100% residential campus, as I mentioned, at Sonoma, so co-curricular activities are huge. I always expressed a little bit of dismay as to why our students, co-curricular covers a multitude of different activities. The more educational ones seem to be attended slightly less than perhaps the more popular ones, like a magician show. All of it, all part of class life, of course, but I always found it was a little bit of a missed opportunity for that learning outside the classroom that must happen. So right now I'm in the process of putting into place a co-curriculum transcript. And that has been hugely popular. It's not quite in place yet. There's a few mechanistic issues with it. 100% support by the students and the faculty, because now suddenly they realize, oh, now if I go to that leadership conference or if I attend 5 concerts at the music center, I can have that reflected on my transcript. And that is another extra that employers need to see. Or if I have a study abroad experience, that should be reflected on the transcript so that students can then show their employer, I've done more than just my degree in psychology. And so we're putting into place co-curricular transcript, and as I said, that has been huge. The students suddenly want it now, and now they're asking for more curricular activities on the campus. Does that address your question well enough? The two are interrelated, and particularly in a liberal arts university, most learning happens outside the classroom, believe it or not, in the co-curricular world, and that's all in the hands of student affairs.
It's been interesting because the residential population has doubled in 10 years and is going to continue to probably get close to doubling again, and so more of those opportunities.
And that's what's going to keep students here. I mean, again, I'm not pointing fingers, I'm just kind of looking at your statistics that are on the website, but 33% of students transfer out of MSU. 33%, that's a third of your students don't actually stay till the end. And as you're facing dropping head counts, that's the population you need to keep here, because you don't need more recruitment, although we'd like to go, and as a president, it would be my first responsibility to increase the headcount, the enrollment of freshmen and transfer students. But the easiest way to increase your headcount is to keep them here. And you're going to keep them here by campus climate and all these opportunities that we can do when we're much more of a residential community. And that would be exciting. And that's completely in line with the COPLAC mission, the Council of Public Liberal Arts Colleges' vision for what a good liberal education should be all about. Our students need to be leaders, and they don't learn that in the classroom. They learn that outside the classroom.
Well, Dr. Rogerson, Dirk Welch, Chair of Staff Senate, as well as Director of our Career and Testing Services programs. This gets into what you just alluded to about campus climate. What does it mean for you to have a commitment to diversity? How have you demonstrated that commitment? And how would you see yourself demonstrating it here?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's one every president in America must be ready for, because as you know, the diversity is here, and if it's not quite here yet, the projections are by the year 2040 there will be more people of color in America than we have. More than half the people half the population will be people of color in America. So we have a very large number of underrepresented minority students coming to our campuses. We already have that here at MSU. And just like in every other university across America, we're failing those students. And when you look at what's called the attainment rate for the degrees, they're always a good 10 percentage points behind our classically white students. So somehow the first piece of the diversity puzzle is to do something about the degree attainment rate of these students who are clearly struggling in our educational system and who will soon become the majority of people in this country. So that is a huge pressure on a president and indeed everyone that works at the university. The other piece of that, though, to get back to the more specific question about diversity on a campus, we really must come to celebrate the value of diversity, and that is an educational event. It's not enough to just have people, shall we say, tolerant of diversity or accepting of diversity on the campus. We really have to realize that this is a national resource, and so we must have everyone look at themselves, at their own diversity. Diversity meaning, of course, everyone's difference, and you could go down to the extreme where everyone is individually different. We must be comfortable looking at that difference, and we must be accepting that this is a resource we must capitalize on. I think we've seen this change in culture in America, and it's very gratifying that, I think it was Israel Zangwill, I might have that name wrong, apologies because I'm on video, but he was a Jewish immigrant way back in the early 20th century, and he was the first person to coin the term melting pot. And the concept of melting pot is that all this diversity would somehow blend together and assimilate, and everyone would then lose their cultural identities, and that's where the idea, the concept of a melting pot came about. But of course, it doesn't work that way, because everyone's comfortable to a certain degree to lose their identity, but then they don't want to go any further, and they shouldn't. And so nowadays, we don't look at it as a melting pot, it's a redundant term. We use the term pluralism. And that's a completely different way of looking at diversity, because that's looking at everyone's diversity as an asset. And the role of a university is to give that education to the entire student body, that difference needs to be celebrated, difference needs to be applauded, and differences need to be sort of seen as a resource for the future of this country. You asked specifically how one does that. The first piece of it, of course, is we have to have more diversity represented on the campus, and we have that coming along quite naturally in the student body. but we have to have that same diversity represented by the staff and by the faculty, and I think all universities are working hard to make that happen. The second piece is we must address campus climate. We must be an incredibly welcoming campus climate for student diversity or students of color, so that they come and they feel that they are celebrated in the way that I alluded to a few moments ago. And then we have to infuse it in the curriculum as well, because as I said, it's not enough to just have students accept diversity. We actually have to have them aware of the value of diversity. And that then becomes a curriculum issue. And I believe that we need the faculty to be behind that, to talk about diversity in their classrooms and really work with the changing population. And of course, that's the fourth piece, that we need to work harder, because this fact that we're graduating students of color 10%, 15% percentage points less than white students is just not acceptable. And that's institutional change that will make that happen. So the tools are out there. We just have to do it. Great role of a university. It's what we should be doing.
I have to stand on my tippy toes. Good morning. I'm Donnie Westbrook. I'm an academic advisor in our Mustangs Advising Center, which is a first-year center, one of our first-year centers. Can you comment on your importance or your thoughts on the importance of academic advising, and how you would bolster a first-year experience for our students?
Sure, I'd love to. We're sort of doing that at Sonoma State right now. Across the whole CSU, we're incredibly aware that what we need to do is get graduation rate increased across the system, and we particularly have to concentrate on the underrepresented minorities and their graduation rates. So there's huge interest in getting all the 23 campuses to really drill down and find ways to make students more successful. And again, as a slight digression, I hope everyone here realizes that future funding across America will probably be accountability measures in the not too distant future. How many students you graduate, how many take 6 years, how many take 4 years. These measures are going to determine our future funding. But we should be doing it anyway, because we're in the business of educating students, and that's our job. We've tackled our first year retention, which is what you're alluding to, by doing two things. We've instigated what's called a first year learning cohort. And most of our students at risk are students who haven't declared a major. They haven't connected with the subject area they want to connect with. They come in, they don't know what they want to be, but we are making them at least think about what they might like to be. And so before they can even come to orientation, which is compulsory at Sonoma, we make them tick a box of what's called a learning cohort. So for instance, they may have a leaning towards the humanities. And so there'll be a group of 3 or 4 courses that are all humanities orientated. And for the first year, they would take those, they won't get lost, they won't take needless courses, and with luck, they'll get turned on to the humanities and declare a major in that particular school. Or they may come in with a leaning towards the sciences, and we'll give them a cohort in the sciences that's relevant, and so on. All 1,800 of our freshmen must choose a learning cohort before they come in. For those that are undeclared, we make them do a course, it's a 1 course credit, in choosing a major. So they actually have to go and do a course choosing a major. And they get bombarded by all the chairs of the different departments who are canvassing for them. But they suddenly feel welcome, and they know the different options out there. It's too easy for a student to come in and say, I want to be a psychologist. They all do that, or a sociologist. But do you want to do a degree in women and gender studies? They've never heard of that one. But once they hear about it and realize that that can really work for their careers, then they choose it. So all of this is to try and get them to choose a major by the end of the first year. The other piece of it, though, is huge. It's advising. And we've really bolstered our advising, because students are getting lost because they don't understand how to get through a degree. They say they do, They go ask their friend in the dorm who gives them misinformation, and it just spirals out of control. But if you make mandatory advising, you make them go to an advisor, and you put on appropriate advising, then you can get them on track, they don't get lost, and sure enough, they choose a major in a timely fashion. We have a first year retention rate of over 80%, and that's just been creeping up over the last 4 years because of these two pieces were put into place, a first year learning cohort and much better advising. And we're continuing to work on it. But it's all about making students feel that they're not lost. I could go on because there's a million other metrics you can use to make students successful, but I'll just stick to the advising one you asked about.
Hi, I'm Claudio Rodriguez. I work for housing and the complex coordinator for the apartments. And I just want to know your thoughts on the values of remaining an independent institution versus joining a system.
It's a good question, and before I answer that, I'm just going to preface it by going, if I give the wrong answer, forgive me, I've only been here for 24 hours. But I am part of a system. Sonoma State University, as I've said, is one of 23 campuses in the largest system in the entire world. I'm also aware that this is being videoed, and there could be several people at Sonoma State watching this. Accept that as part of my answer as well. My gut feeling is that having independence is a very good thing. I look at the 23 campus system of the CSU, 400,000 students, every campus very, very different. And doing campus decisions based on system needs is quite often at odds, and is very difficult for a system to make a judgment that really fits all campuses, all very different campuses in that system. So as I look at this university, I say it has to be a huge advantage to have an independent board that the president is very connected with on a very personal basis, and that together you have the autonomy to make the changes that are needed to make this university the best destination campus in Texas in the next 10 years, which would be my stated goal right now. On the other hand, I would imagine, and I'm just guessing now, that being independent leaves you a little bit more vulnerable in terms of your ability to negotiate with the legislature for a fair slice of the pie. You would probably have a little bit more power if you were part of a system and could lobby as a system for better share of resources. So I would imagine that those are the two competing issues in that debate, but I would still lean towards independence as the preferable choice, because it gives you that incredible flexibility to make this campus unique, which it is, but to really shout about its uniqueness. That is my 24 hours on the job.
Hi, Marilyn Follet. I've already spoken this morning. Talk about a little bit about how you would transition, and you've got a lot of transitions to do. You would be transitioning from a provost to a presidency, California to Texas, in your first year, how do you navigate that?
It's a great question, and as norm for me answering questions up here, I'll digress a little bit and then come back on to it. I've done a lot of transitions in the past, so transitions actually excite me. I've had 8 universities under my belt, which I see as an asset, by the way, because it gives me a very global, national perspective on education. And every one of those changes has been a transition. And the same kind of transition you're talking about. It's always been a step up to a higher position, and it's always been to a different geographic location. And I've thrived under both. I really love change. I love helping institutions. In terms of actual practicalities, though, of should I walk into this presidency in July or whenever it would start, I have a great colleague who's a former dean of business, and his advice to me always has been spend the first 3 months kicking the tires. I would certainly spend a month kicking the tires. In other words, really getting to know what the university is all about. I don't think I'd want to spend 3 months or 6 months kicking the tires, because this is a time for action. This is a time for really starting to consider the kinds of changes we need to make this university that destination campus. The way you do it, of course, is to talk to everyone and anyone. I have such an open door policy. I have such a collaborative style. I think it comes from being a scientist. I was once asked to give a talk on leadership, and somewhat tongue-in-cheek, I thought, oh, I'll just look at the qualities of a good scientist and relate them to qualities of a good leader. And once you do that exercise, you suddenly realize it's not so fanciful. You need the same qualities, and those qualities are things like ethical behavior, teamwork, delegation, listening, humility, because I don't know everything. I need to be able to recognize I don't have the answer to that and go to the person who does have the answer. Resilience. If you're in the scientific world, you're constantly getting your publication turned down, even though you think it's the best one in the world. And you have to bounce back from that, and that's an important skill set in leadership as well, because not everyone's going to agree with what the president decrees as a wonderful idea. But it's also a willingness to listen, to assimilate all the different arguments, and then have the courage to make that decision. So it needs ultimately the ability to be straightforward once you have that information and make the decision. One of my heroes in the academic world, and there are not that many presidents out there that I absolutely hold up on a pedestal, but Stephen Sample, who brought the University of Southern California to the heights it's at now, he's retired, but he transformed that university. He's written a wonderful book on academic leadership, and he really, there's a whole chapter on what he calls artful procrastination, which I love, which just means taking your time. And you really need to take your time and get all the viewpoints before you make that important decision. So I'm kind of dancing around it, but it's basically the thought of a new location doesn't worry me, it excites me. The thought of a new position with its challenges really excites me. And the way of going about it is to be incredibly inclusive, because a president is just a facilitator of all the good ideas on the campus. A president should not be a dictator. That does not work in academia. Thank you.
Kobe Stiles, head cross-country and track coach. What are your thoughts on the role athletics play for a university?
Well, athletics is hugely important, particularly in Texas, so I'm not about to answer that in the negative. But on an incredibly serious note, I mean, as I look at this university from afar, and I go on social media to see what students are thinking about this university, athletics is at the absolute root of campus pride on this campus, as is probably true in all Texas universities. So athletics plays an enormous role here in terms of the campus climate, the making the students connect with the university through athletics, with the community. I imagine the athletics events bring huge community support, and of course with the alumni base, which is so important for the future of MSU. So the function of the whole athletics is crucial to a successful university, particularly, as I said, in Texas. The other piece of it is, though, for the benefit to the students who are participating in the athletics. Athletics is just fabulous for giving those students those skill sets that we must impart in our students. They're all in leadership roles by being part of a team. They are resilient, because I don't think you win every game, but I haven't really checked that one out, but I hope you do. But occasionally you might lose a game, and those students do have to be able to stand up and go fight the next fight. Collaboration, teamwork, all of it imparts fabulous ethical behavior in the students who do take part in athletics. And I believe it's about 300 students on this campus in those 12 intercollegiate programs. So I think athletics is fabulous for the students that are involved with it. I think athletics is huge for the campus climate and to really help bring students here and keep them here. So I am a supporter. I also want to add that I have a slight Scottish accent. I'm working on the southern drawl, but I know a lot about football. I was at Marshall University. I made the hideous mistake of when I went for the interview for a dean's position and said, "Do you have a football team?" I still got the job, just. But of course, we've all heard of We Are Marshall. It's a huge football university. I then went to an even bigger football university, Fresno State. So I think I probably know more about football than most people in this room. I hope that answers your question. I do celebrate athletics and all it stands for.
Hello, my name is Jessica Fisher. I'm a member of the Staff Senate and I'm Secretary for the West College of Education. My question is, you mentioned that the staff was an engine, part of the engine of the university. What would you do to make and keep the staff thriving and keeping the engine running?
You mean gratitude, appreciation is not enough? Of course you want more money. And really, of course, all players on a university need to be recognized annually. And it is a struggle these days with the budget. And again, I would ask that you have the, shall we say, the confidence in me as a leader to know that it will come and that we will get ourselves out of what is a challenging financial time. And it's not just for MSU, this is for every university in America. I'm actually seeing a more robust university here than perhaps some of the ones, this is on video, it's no mistake. But we're all struggling. But I want you to believe that I can get this university turned around. We can get the enrollment up. You are tuition driven, so you need those students to come. But I need the staff to get behind it. I need staff to help me get that extra recruitment, to get more students here, to keep them here, to make their lives happier, to help them get better advising. It's all staff related. And then as the fiscal position of the university changes, and it will, that is my job as a president, then everyone gets recognized with more than just gratitude and appreciation, but with a little bit more in your salary packets. But I can't stand up here after 24 hours and promise it will happen in 6 months' time. But I am very aware that we're all a little late in getting that kind of appreciation that we deserve. I don't want to make false promises, but you're all on the radar screen. We good? Nope.
I am Leslie Berryhill, Instructional Technologist. How high a priority do you place on technology for staff, faculty, students? And how important is an online environment to a university?
No, two very good questions. The first is instructional technology, or just technology on the campus is huge. We're handling a different kind of student coming our way now that expects this, and we need to be in a position to give them what they're expecting. The technology of many of our high schools is better than the technology capability of many of our universities. So much of the learning now is technology driven. I mean, 16 years ago there was an influential paper that reminded us that university's role is not instruction. A university's role is learning, and they're two very different categories. And now we can really do something about learning and student-centered learning environments by using technology to help us. It's a struggle because it costs money. I'm in the process of putting together right now a technology-rich experimental classroom at Sonoma State, because we have to get faculty not only willing to be involved in changes in their learning strategy, but also be able to go in and then practice it. And so we need a space where that can happen and we can really promote it. We also hired someone who's an instructional designer who can guide the faculty in this path. But we're moving slowly, far too slowly, and of course it's resource driven, and you have the same problem here. So I think to get back to the need to do something about technology, that would be on the president's shoulder. That's something that donors should be able to get behind. The whole arena of learning has changed. We have to change with it. Collaborative classrooms, learning in groups, that is where the future of learning is. No more sage on the stage with a piece of chalk and a blackboard. So I'm 100% behind it. It's a big cost that I imagine could be a really good opportunity for a donor to get behind improving the learning of all students at MSU. The distance arena, we have to get into it. It's here. It's here for several reasons. The students want it. And the reason they want it is, if you believe the incoming students over the next 10 years will not be largely full-time students. We'll still have a large number of incoming freshmen who may come here for 4 years, but increasingly students are going to have to work in parallel to their studies. And so we have to do business differently. We can still be a 4-year university and we can offer evening classes perhaps, or weekend classes to accommodate students who cannot come at 11 o'clock on a Thursday morning. But we can also do it through distance. And we have to start making distance courses available to our students, particularly those who are working, trying to cope with the increasing costs of college. And that's going to be quite a change. We already do some of it here, but we have to get more people on board. And again, it comes back to that. We need the technology, we need the instructional designer to work with the faculty to put on a meaningful course that can be delivered online. It is not about just cutting and pasting your lecture notes and putting them online so someone can read them. It's moved on way beyond that. So we are moving in that direction at Sonoma. I have been involved in previous universities where distance was huge, and I found it went really well. So I'm a proponent of it. We have to work carefully and slowly through it, do it right, make sure it's rigorous, but we would be blind if we sat here and said, we're just going to continue to do classroom instruction. Those days are gone. We want a balance though. And there are other models. We could do a hybrid education, which is also very effective, where it's half in the classroom and half distance. We don't want to lose sight that we are a campus, and that is the extra we can give our students.
I'm the university librarian, Claire Lathan.
Before you begin, this will be our last question.
Oh, okay, well, that was lucky. A natural follow-on question, how does the library fit in that picture of technology, and what kind of experience do you have with that?
Yeah. Well, I'm rather hoping you can answer that one. Because that is a huge challenge. What is the role of a library in the future of a university? And that's one all libraries are struggling with and trying to reimagine. But I think their role in terms of technology is enormous. We're fortunate at Sonoma State to have a library that's not called a library, it's actually called a Center of, what is it called? Technological something or instruction. It's given a slightly different name. But their whole role has to be really to help move forward with the digital age and help educate our students in areas such as, the credibility of what they find online. It's all very well to do Wikipedia and start writing your essay based on that, but that's not a very good source of information to go to. And so the librarians are very big on that kind of innovation, making sure that our students know how to get access to solid data in the digital age. But we also have a faculty centre now in our library, which is all about instructional technology. And we deliberately put it in the library because we see that as one of the main functions of the up-and-coming library. But I really would be quite honest and say I defer any further than that, because this is such a debate that's going on across America. How can we use our libraries somewhat differently to move forward in what's changing at breakneck speed? And I'd love to have that conversation with you. I don't want anyone to think the library is in any concern or any doubt for the future. They're obviously an integral part of a university. But the days of populating a library with thousands and thousands of paper textbooks and journals is gone. And it's hitting the libraries very fast about how to adapt to those changes. And I think this could be one of the exciting discussions we have in the future. And with that very inadequate answer, I think we close this session there. But thank you very, very much for all your time.